Good afternoon, everybody. As we are getting ready for a very special Shabbat, it's very special because it has a very special description. It is called Shabbat nachamu. Nachamu means to console, to comfort. And it's not just a one-time comfort and consoling. The prophet Isaiah, his very special style was to repeat and to say things, to double it. Nachamu, nachamu ami. We're going to read in a couple of weeks where he says, Anoichi, Anoichi, hu menachemchem. In another place he says, Uri, Uri. This was his style, very heartfelt, very deep, and that is the way he took upon himself the mission to be a prophet of God. Isaiah, very dedicated, only to relay the positive and the upbeat words that he would transmit from God. And in this week's Torah portion, the words are Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. Console and console, God says, the Jewish people. Enough. They've paid enough for their iniquity. And that's what we're praying for, that it should be enough of this coronavirus, and that we should already see from these difficulties the goal and the purpose of all hardships. Like the Rebbe would say many different times, he was waiting for the moment that he would be able to express gratitude and thanks to God for the exile. In the words of the prophet, Oitcha Hashem ki onafta. I will acknowledge you, God, for all the times that you are angry at me. So this Shabbat is the Shabbat of comfort, of being consoled by God. Come to the synagogue or pray at your home and do it with all your heart and soul. And if you open up your heart and your soul, you will be able to receive the double comfort, the double consolation that comes from God on this very Shabbat after the very, very sad events that we were commemorating yesterday when we read in the 9th of Av from the book of Lamentations, from the book of Jeremiah, very, very sad, heartbreaking words that the Jewish people went through. It was a Holocaust all on its own. Over 6 million people died in the destruction of the temple. It was a terrible tragedy in the most cruel and in the most terrible way possible. But we are looking forward, God willing, to the times when all of this, the epoch, God says, and I will turn around Yemei Evlam, the days of their mourning, to Yemei Sasin V'Simcha, the days of joys and happiness. Okay, so being focused on joy and on happiness and on the comfort of this Shabbat, we got so much going on in this week's Torah portion that inspires us, that strengthens us and blesses us, not only on the Shabbat, but from the Shabbat we take the strength and blessing for the whole coming week. In this week's Torah portion, we have the Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, that very special proclamation of unity that every single Jewish male has an obligation to say every morning and every night. Very, very powerful in many different ways. The Lubavitcher Rebbe asks the question, why do we say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, that God is Echad, one? It would have been a lot more appropriate to say Hashem Yachid. God is the only one. Echad is a word in Hebrew that explains the unity of many different individual units. As our sages actually tell us, we're supposed to have in mind when we say the word Echad, that God is one, Aleph, Ches, in the 7 heavens and in the 1 earth, Dalid, Echad, Dalid in the 4 sides of the world. So wherever you turn, it's really all the same energy and the same underlying force, the same one God that is everywhere. But it would have been a lot more appropriate when talking about this one God to refer to him as Hashem Yachid. God is the only one, not only one, and maybe perhaps that the number 2 can follow after it. He is such a unique identity that he is Yachid. Why does the Torah use the term Echad? And the Rebbe answers the question by helping us and guiding us to appreciate what is Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad all about. In those words, we're saying, God, our God. It would have been enough to say Shema Yisrael. Listen, Jewish people, Hashem Echad. God is one. Why does it say Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad? In Kabbalah, it explains that Hashem, the Yud He Vav He, that name of God, and Eloheinu, that other name of God. God has many different names that describes different facets of God. So there is one name of God which is Hashem, Yud, and then He, Vav, and then He, and that's the essential core name of God that represents a very powerful essence and potential for everything. But then there's another name of God, and that is Eloheinu, and that is our God who created this physical existence. And that's what the Shema Yisrael wants us to consider every time we cover our eyes, so that we're not distracted by what's going on around us. We want to concentrate on the idea, Shema Yisrael, listen, pay attention, Jewish people. This God, Yud and He, Vav and He, who is the essence and the potential of everything, he is the same God who created all the different variety that is in the world. The creation of Elokeinu, nature, and everything that we see around us is really just an extension of Yud Ke Vav Ke. It's really Hashem. It's the one God who is Echad, the same in the seven heavens, in the one earth, and in the four sides of the world. So this is a very special, unique message that the Torah wants us to think about, and it recognizes, it acknowledges that we live in a place that you don't see God all around you. You got to work on it, and you got to meditate on it, that it's all created and designed by a tremendous, intelligent designer with tremendous amount of kindness and goodness. And it's all the same one everywhere we go and everything that we experience. And that's the reason why it uses the word echad and not yachid, because of that specific message that this statement wants you to meditate, to concentrate, and to think about. And when you do that, what are the next words that follow this statement? The ahavta, you shall love, et Hashem Elokecha, God your God. You see, in that statement that follows the Shema Yisrael, it uses again those two names of God. When you will think about God in the way that we just talked about, you will come to love. You will come to appreciate and feel attached and want to remain connected to not just the God that is somewhere up in the heavens, the essence of it all. You will understand that that God, who is the essence of everything, is really inside everything. It's all just Him. And there's really not that many different things that are pulling you in so many different directions that can put so much stress and tension and anxiety in you. That's all just on the surface. But now that you've meditated on Hashem Elokeinu, that God is the same God that you see all around you everywhere else, you've been able now to develop and naturally feel an attachment and an attraction to this essence who is all around you and everywhere. That's the definition of love, that you feel tremendously positive and good and in confidence and connected. That's the whole idea of love. So that's what we're reading in this week's Torah portion. In the beginning of this week's Torah portion, we also begin with the very special message that Moses tells us related to the power of prayer. The word that this week's Torah portion begins with is Vo'eschanan el Hashem bo'esahi, and I pleaded with God at that time. And this expression of Vo'eschanan, our sages tell us there are 10 different expressions of prayer. Vo'eschanan is one of the highest of all the ways that a person can pray, and he can try to uplift himself and attach himself with God. That's what prayer is all about. Why and what makes this expression so powerful? And Rashi, the commentator, he explains this expression Vo'eschanan, and he says, tzaddikim, holy godly people like Moses, could really come and plead to God on the basis of their merits. After all, they are righteous, godly individuals, work very hard to sacrifice living in a physical world, and they can really come on the basis of what they did and what they earned. But even so, Moses came before God on the basis of pleading to God, matnas chinam. God, I plead with you for no other reason but because you are kind, because you are good. Please give me a gift of what I am asking for. And in this particular case, Moses was asking to come into the land of Israel. That was his prayer at that time. But there was another plan, and that's for another talk. What we're emphasizing right now is the expression, which is unusual, and that's because it is so unique and it's one of the highest levels and ways for a person to come before God, and that's the best way to come before God. When we are praying, we are recognizing God's goodness and kindness. He created a world in goodness and in kindness. He gives us every single moment so much more than what we earn and what we deserve. And on that basis, we come before the all merciful and the all kind God. And we come and we connect ourselves with God. And I come before you, God, on the basis of chanun, of kindness, of grace, and of goodness. So those are two things I'd like to leave with everybody on this Friday. As we prepare, we can already smell the cholent and all the fish and all the challah getting ready for Shabbos. That's the way a traditional home already is getting into the spirit of Shabbat. And you should all have a good Shabbos and a Shabbos of comfort and of consolation and of true spiritual meditation and of love for God and success in recognizing that everything around you is only the essence of the good God, and then that will bring you to the greatest of blessings and of experience, not just for this Shabbat, but as Shabbat blesses the whole coming week, for the whole coming week. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.